My name is David Cornwell, and I'm the CEO of PleaseTech. And I'm very delighted to introduce Michael Osterman, who's going to be primarily giving this webinar on better tools mean happier and more productive workers. So I'm just going to go down to the next slide now. And Michael, over to you.
Well, David, thank you very much. It's a genuine pleasure to be here, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's on the call with us today. I think that you'll be able to get some very useful information from the research that we've done and to be able to put that to use right away in your organization. So just a little bit about Osterman Research. If we can go to the next slide, please. There we go. We're an independent market research and consulting firm. We have a little bit more information about us on the next page, but essentially what we're here today to talk about is a survey that we conducted in December of last year. We spoke with 166 individuals really across a wide range of industries, and our goal was to understand how individuals collaborate on various projects, how they collaborate on documents, the problems that they experience, the kinds of things that they'd like to see improved in the document collaboration process, and so forth. And so this is a fairly in-depth survey. It was conducted online with members of our own survey panel, and our goal was really to get a better understanding of the document collaboration process. So we wanted to quantify it. We wanted to explore ways in which document collaboration could be improved, and so forth. And the real focus was on understanding current collaboration processes in SharePoint and in other tools and so forth, and really understanding the full impact of document collaboration on knowledge workers, to understand if things really could be improved, and if the use of appropriate tools for document collaboration could really help to retain knowledge workers, to make their lives better, if you will, and to make them more likely to stay with their employer. If we can go to the next slide, please. So again, just a little bit about Osterman Research. We're an independent market research firm, and so we really focus on a wide variety of topic areas, certainly document collaboration, but then everything around that. Archiving of content, security, encryption, how content is managed, and so forth. And the company is about 14 years old, and we are based near Seattle. Next slide, please.
So I guess this is my part, Dave Cornwell, the CEO of PleaseTech. Where does PleaseTech fit into it? Well, we're the document co-authoring and review specialists, and what we do is design collaborative document review and co-authoring solutions. Its main product, Please Review, provides collaborative and controlled document review and co-authoring. We make the review process both efficient, transparent, and auditable. And the software is proven to offer tangible benefits, and typically we're seeing 50+ time savings in document preparation time. Please Review itself is used across industry sectors and departments. We have clients in life sciences. That accounts for about 65% of our business. We have clients in defense. We have clients in the military. We have clients basically across all industry sectors. We do a lot of research. We do research at conferences, and we publish quite a lot of material into trying to understand our market, trying to understand why people use our software, what benefits they get from it, and what challenges they face. And we partnered with Osterman Research because we think of them as a respected industry commentator, and what they can do is they can provide independent research. And so while we've commissioned the research has been entirely independent from their perspective. And the key thing was to look at a number of questions, and the questions we asked them to research were the state of the collaborative nation, our observation from practical experience that knowledge workers, the end users of our software, influence IT, and so to what extent is that true across industry, and how far do they influence the IT side of the business, and then look at SharePoint. The 100-pound gorilla, SharePoint. Is it meeting collaborative requirements? So we commissioned Osterman to undertake this research, and this webinar presents the results of their research. Michael.
Well, David, thank you very much. And I really do want to stress the fact that we are an independent research organization. We don't have any particular axes to grind with respect to one vendor or another. So this research that we did really was quite independently done. And so we came to what we consider to be very solid observations and conclusions about the state of collaboration today. So what exactly is collaboration? Well, certainly there are going to be a number of definitions based on the type of collaborative work that an organization does, that individuals do, and so forth. But we really see collaboration as working with others on the creation of documents, on the management of documents, editing, and so forth. And this is becoming a much more important issue really for organizations of all sizes and pretty much across all industries, although our research did find some fairly significant differences between industries. But collaboration is becoming more important because the workforce is becoming more geographically distributed. Because of the availability of cloud-based applications, unified communications, there are a variety of tools in use. It allows organizations to become much more distributed. What we find in our research is that organizations are employing people really all over the world. IBM, for example, has more than 40% of their employees who work from home. And so they don't really have an office. And in some cases, we're finding that individuals don't even have telephone numbers anymore because the entire concept of place is disappearing as they become more distributed and really can work from any venue anywhere in the world. And so we're finding collaboration to become a much more important issue, and good collaborative software, good document management software is becoming more important simply because people aren't in the same office anymore. They can't meet around a conference table. Very often they don't communicate by telephone. They work collaboratively on documents, and so the entire notion of document collaboration is becoming a much more serious issue and much more important in terms of the productivity of individual workers. So next slide, please. So the three elements really of collaboration that we're focusing on here are working on a document with one or more colleagues, again, a very common occurrence in information-oriented organizations, using some sort of a collaborative platform to work on a document, and then also working on the same copy of a document simultaneously. And these are critical elements of document collaboration because all three are essential in order to be able to get work done. The serial nature of work where, for example, someone sends another a document via email, that individual works on it, sends it to someone else, and so forth, is still somewhat common, but it really is not a workable solution. David, do you have any comments on this?
Absolutely. I mean, what we see really is people working around existing systems and using email, but they realize immediately that it's not an optimal solution. And when we talk to people, we say, oh, so you're emailing attachments around, are you? And these are the problems you're going to face. And they nod sagely because they face those problems. And the problems are people working on different copies of the document, people having to amalgamate all the comments and changes, disagreements not coming out in the open until right at the end of the process, and just to name three which spring to mind instantly. So we certainly see that people who are using email and email attachments as having they recognize it's not optimal. Sometimes it's the best they've got, and that's where we need to educate them.
Yes, very definitely. And just citing one of those problems, version control is a critical issue when you're dealing with document collaboration via just an email channel. Version control is a very serious issue. People will work on a document and later find out it's the wrong version and so forth. So good document collaboration is really a necessity, and its necessity grows as organizations become more distributed. Next slide, please. So one of the things we wanted to determine in the research is just how much collaboration is really going on in information-focused organizations. And what we found is that during a typical month, and this is in talking to individuals who are sharing documents, who are working on them collaboratively and so forth, We found that the typical knowledge worker is collaborating on an average of slightly more than 3 documents per day. During a typical month, they'll produce about 36 documents that need some sort of review by others, and about 34 documents per month are those which others send them. So really a lot of document collaboration activity going on in the typical organization. And so if we assume that there's about 20 minutes per document that's required for review, for adding comments, for doing whatever else is necessary in a collaborative environment, we're looking at the typical information worker spending about 1 out of every 7 hours per day doing something in the context of collaboration. So about 14% of a typical information worker's day is really tied up in doing something on working on documents collaboratively. So it's a fairly significant proportion of the typical user's day, and one that really has not adequately been addressed in many organizations because they don't have the right tools to do the job. Next slide, please. What we also found is that we broke the data sets down into heavily regulated industries and less heavily regulated industries. And one comment here, one of the things we find in our research is that a lot of decision makers, if they're in, let's say, in the manufacturing space, in retail, and a variety of other industries, they may not believe that they are in a quote-unquote regulated industry. What we find, though, is that every organization faces some level of regulation. It's really only a matter of degree. So we separated the data into heavily regulated organizations, those in the energy space, financial services, healthcare, pharma, life sciences, and so forth, and then everyone else, those in organizations that are less heavily regulated. And what we found is that knowledge workers in more heavily regulated industries tend to collaborate on documents more frequently than those in less heavily regulated industries. And part of the reason for that is that there are just a lot more compliance requirements, obviously, in a heavily regulated industry. And so we'll find that organizations such as in life sciences or government, for example, tend to have a lot more collaborative work to do simply because of the compliance issues that they have to satisfy. We found, for example, that a knowledge worker in a heavily regulated industry collaborates on about 4 documents per day versus about 2.7 documents per day for information workers in less heavily regulated industries. And David, wanted to bring you in here as well. Certainly your focus is very heavily on life sciences, one of the more heavily regulated industries. And what are some of the demand drivers you see among your customers for document collaboration?
Well, I think the sheer volume, frankly. Everybody's got to do a lot with less, and frequently it's just the sheer volume of documentation which they've got to get through, whether that is internal standard operating procedures, whether it's submissions to the regulatory authorities, or other documents. Some of these documents are very large, they're very detailed, and the pressure on people to meet timelines and to produce the documents and make sure that the documents are of a certain and a suitable quality. Obviously, a key document quality is very, very important. If you're submitting a document to the regulator, if that is not a quality document, if there are mistakes in it, if there are errors in it, that's not a very good place to be. So the volume and the need to process that amount of information with the accompanying need of quality, I think, is the key drivers there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Next slide, please. Another thing we wanted to find from the research is the extent to which document collaboration poses a problem to knowledge workers. And what we found is that really for the majority of workers, there is some level of problem associated with the entire document collaboration process. We found that most workers, have some level of problem. Some are not facing severe problems. Others are facing really quite serious problems. And those problems really range across the board. They can be reflected in poor document quality, which, as David pointed out, can be a very serious issue. And if you're in a more heavily regulated industry and you're turning documents over to some sort of a compliance-focused regulator, to a court, what have you, they can include missed deadlines, difficulty maintaining corporate standards, satisfying a variety of compliance obligations, even if those documents are not necessarily going directly to a regulator or to a court. And so document collaboration in general really is a problem for most knowledge workers. They face some level of issue with the entire process, with the tools they're using, with their ability to manage the entire document collaboration process effectively and efficiently. And I think at this point we're going to be doing a poll. We'll wait just a moment for that to come up. And David, I'm not seeing that. Is that just on my end, or are you seeing it?
No, I'm not seeing it either. I'm trying to, sorry, let me go back, trying to work out why that is. It is being viewed by the attendees, Michael, I think, because we're getting responses coming in. We're just not seeing that in our presenter screens.
Oh, okay. Very good. Not a problem at all. We'll leave that open for just another few seconds, and then if we could close that out and see the results.
Okay, I think we'll close that now, and hopefully we can just see the results of that.
Okay, I'm not seeing the results, but David, can you see them? There we go, perfect. Okay, and this is pretty much in line with what we found as well. Have you ever encountered problems reviewing a document with a team of people? The vast majority of us on the call today have encountered some level of problem. So that certainly corroborates the research that we have.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we're back now to the, so we move on to the next slide.
Yes, please. So one of the things we wanted to find is what sort of problems are organizations having? So we posed a number of problems to survey respondents, and we asked them to rate them on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 was no problem at all, and 7 was a significant or extremely significant problem. And what we found is that certainly there are differences between heavily regulated and less heavily regulated organizations, but we found a fairly significant proportion of knowledge workers that faced document collaboration problems of some kind. For example, in terms of compliance and regulatory issues, 33% of knowledge workers in heavily regulated organizations faced some fairly significant problems. And these are those who rated the problems 6 or 7 on that scale of 1 to 7. Certainly, as we'd expect, in less heavily regulated organizations, compliance and regulatory issues were not nearly as much of a problem. But then when we get into things like process issues and maintaining corporate standards, we find that document collaboration really is a problem for a fairly significant proportion of knowledge workers, regardless of the type of industry they're in, whether it's a more heavily or less heavily regulated. And so a fairly large proportion here of knowledge workers are facing some fairly significant document collaboration problems. And we found, certainly as you can see in the first set of bars here, that knowledge workers in heavily regulated organizations face up to about 4 times more document collaboration issues than their counterparts in less regulated organizations. And that's a very serious issue, and one that a lot of organizations have not yet overcome because they don't have the appropriate tools in place, as we'll be focusing on here in just a few minutes. Next slide, please. So certainly the level of document collaboration problems that exist out there really beg the question, should your organization attempt to improve the collaboration process, or should you stay with existing tools, existing infrastructure, and simply live with the problem and try to solve the problem in some other way, as opposed to improving the document collaboration tools that are out there? Next slide, please. And the obvious answer is yes. We believe that organizations should focus very heavily on the document collaboration tools that they provide to their knowledge workers, simply because those workers can be more productive if they have better tools. One of the fundamental issues is that knowledge workers are fairly difficult to attract and retain. Good people are not easy to find, and they're certainly not easy to retain, particularly in a robust economy, as we find in a number of nations today, where the economy is certainly improving. It's not great in a lot of countries, but certainly because of an improving economy, there are more choices available to knowledge workers, and it's particularly difficult in places like Silicon Valley, the Boston area, New York, London. In very robust economic markets, it's tough to find good knowledge workers and retain them. So the ability to provide better document collaboration tools, since that's a key part of a knowledge worker's job, is going to be an essential element in helping to retain those workers and attract them initially in the first place. What we found in the research is that only 1 out of 5 organizations has no problems at all in attracting and retaining knowledge workers. So that means that basically for 4 out of 5 companies, they do have some level of difficulty. And we found that that for a little over 1 out of 5 organizations, it's either a regular or a serious problem attracting and retaining those knowledge workers. And so the ability to provide good document collaboration tools is going to be an essential element in helping organizations to keep good people. David, do you have any comments here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about your work environment, isn't it? Because if people have a good work environment where they have effective tools which allow them to do their job, because basically that's what people want to do. They want to do their job and they want to do it well. That's the fundamental truth we must understand. And if they're constantly fighting systems, then that's not a great working environment. If they've feel that they've got the tools and they've got the ability, and obviously there are other areas like authority and so on, but if we're just talking IT tools here, if they've got the IT tools which allow them to do their job efficiently and effectively and support them in doing that, that makes for a better working environment.
Yes, very definitely. And one of the things that's interesting is that if you look at a lot of articles focused on retaining workers and attracting workers to an environment, to a particular company, one of the things you find is that there tends to be a lot of emphasis on the environment, particularly in places like Silicon Valley. They'll have innovative workspaces and large open areas for people to collaborate personally and so forth. And it's interesting that there tends to be more focus on the physical aspects of the workplace as opposed to the tools that workers have to do their job, when in reality, people spend much more time working with tools like email, document collaboration tools, various real-time communications capabilities and so forth, than they do in some sort of a physical environment, particularly as organizations become more geographically distributed. And so there tends to be an underemphasis, if you will, in a lot of organizations on the quality of the document collaboration tools that are in use. And that's a shortcoming that a lot of managers experience, and one that really does have to be addressed. Next slide, please. One of the things we found in the research is that IT plays a fairly significant role in retaining and motivating knowledge workers because they're providing them, or they can provide them with appropriate document collaboration tools. What we found, for example, is that in 14% of the organizations surveyed, IT plays a critical role in choosing the right document collaboration tools in helping to retain and attract knowledge workers. We found that they play an important role in 37% more organizations. So certainly in at least half of the organizations we surveyed, IT plays an essential role in choosing the right document collaboration tools and making those available to knowledge workers. Then looking the other way, knowledge workers really can help to drive change within their IT departments by suggesting the right tools, by providing feedback to IT that says these tools are good, these tools are not. So it's really very much a two-way street. We found in our research that IT plays a critical role in helping knowledge workers to be more productive, to be happier in their jobs and so forth. And knowledge workers play an equally important role by suggesting back to IT, these are the tools that are going to help me do my job more effectively. So it's really very much a symbiotic relationship, and it's essential that organizations provide that appropriate feedback so that IT can help knowledge workers, so that knowledge workers can provide that feedback back to IT. Next slide, please. One of the things we found also in the research is that there are some enormous benefits to be had from providing better document collaboration tools. We found, for example, that when knowledge workers are given better tools, there can be a fairly significant impact on their productivity, on their ability to make decisions more quickly with more information and so forth. So what we found is that if organizations provide better document collaboration tools to their knowledge workers, 85% reported that they can experience increased productivity simply because they have better document collaboration tools. 64% reported that their ability to make decisions more quickly is enhanced. 55% reported that they get better results in the documents that are created. So really here, a number of important benefits and benefits that organizations really should focus on very heavily. Now, one of the problems we find in our research in this project and others is that for a lot of these benefits, increased productivity, faster decision making, and so forth, some decision makers, some particularly business decision makers, but also those in IT, tend not to view these as important because they don't write a check for them. They don't experience the really quantifiable benefits. If an employee is more productive because they have a better document collaboration environment, that's not necessarily something that you can see in a spreadsheet. And so some decision makers aren't going to be as amenable to providing better tools simply because they don't experience the direct benefit or loss from increased productivity. But these are real benefits that organizations can experience, and particularly in a very good environment, in a very competitive environment, the ability to provide better document collaboration tools is going to be an essential element in giving that organization a competitive advantage of some sort, whether it's through increased productivity of their employees, the ability to respond to customer opportunities more quickly, whatever the case. Knowledge workers absolutely need to be given better tools to be more productive. Next slide, please. One of the important findings from the research as well is that we found that for nearly 1 out of 5 knowledge workers we spoke with, they told us they'd be more likely to stay with their current employer if they had better tools, better document collaboration tools with which to do their work. So this is an essential finding of the research, and one that frankly surprised me a little bit because I didn't think it would be quite this high. But certainly in a robust economy, knowledge workers have more options available to them, particularly in some areas like, again, Silicon Valley or the Boston area, where there tends to be a fairly high turnover of workers. It's important that employers provide as good an environment and as good an IT environment, if you will, to be able to retain those workers. Okay, we're going to have another poll now. And we'll leave that open for another 15 seconds or so and then take a look at the results. Okay, if we can close that out and see the results, please. Okay, I'm not seeing the results. David, are you seeing the results yet?
Do you see the results, Michael? Because 100% said yes, by the way, but I've tried to share them.
Okay, and I am not seeing the results, but that certainly is not a surprise. So if we can go to the next slide.
100% said yes on that.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, and if we can just go to the next, perfect, thank you. So, the benefits of retaining knowledge workers, are fairly obvious. Certainly avoiding employee replacement costs, which can be very substantial. There was one study that found it would cost more than $40,000 to replace an employee. So, replacing a knowledge worker, somebody, particularly someone who's been with the organization a long time, can be a very expensive undertaking. New hires are naturally less productive when they first join an organization. They're getting up to speed, really learning the process, learning the customers, learning how to work with others in the organization, learning the particular expertise they need to find within the organization. So for some period of time, new hires are naturally going to be less productive, and so that adds to the cost of replacing the worker that they're replacing. There's also lost social connections, and this is something that shouldn't be underestimated, because one of the key benefits of having a knowledge worker who's been in place for quite some time is that they have a variety of social connections within the organization, within the supply chain, among business partners, among customers, and so forth. And that's something that rarely gets put into some sort of a formalized system. They know who to contact to get decisions made quickly, but that's not something that their replacement can immediately go to and say, okay, I need to contact people A, B, and C to be able to get my job done more effectively. And so when you lose a knowledge worker, you've lost a lot of the social connections and a lot of the ability for that organization to get things done quickly and efficiently. And then you lose employee expertise. And here again, there's very little of that employee expertise that actually gets put into formalized systems. And so when you lose that knowledge worker, you've essentially lost their expertise as well. And that's a critical issue for a lot of organizations, particularly those that are very heavily focused on information, whether it's in the legal industry or life sciences or whatever the case may be. Losing that employee means you lose a lot of the expertise that they possessed. Even if a lot of that has been put into formalized systems, most of it has not been. And so it's incumbent upon organizations to do whatever they can to retain good knowledge workers so that they don't lose these social connections, the employee expertise, and so forth. Next slide, please. As noted here, the cost of replacing a staff member based on the independent study was well over $40,000. And what we've calculated is that if the annual turnover in an organization could be reduced by only 5% in an organization, let's say of 500 employees, the organization would save over $1.1 million per year. So it's absolutely essential that you look at ways of retaining workers really in a variety of ways. It's obviously not just good IT tools that are going to make people stick around, but certainly good document collaboration, good IT infrastructure, the ability to get work done efficiently and effectively is going to be an essential element in retaining knowledge workers. And so it's absolutely essential that you focus on document collaboration as one of those ways to make employees happier and hopefully to retain them for longer periods of time. Next slide, please. Another thing we wanted to focus on in the research was the role of SharePoint. And Microsoft has done really a very good job at getting SharePoint out into its customer base. They've provided excellent pricing, and they've been very aggressive over the past several years in getting SharePoint at least in place in organizations, even if it's not widely deployed. In a particular organization. But we find that SharePoint has been fairly widely deployed. Most organizations have SharePoint at least available to employees, even if business critical applications are not yet running on it. What we found, though, is that a lot of organizations have not yet adequately allocated resources to their SharePoint deployments. They haven't really focused heavily on making SharePoint the primary document collaboration platform. And what we found is that even among those organizations that have made SharePoint that primary document collaboration tool, a lot of knowledge workers believe that there are other tools that would be more effective. We found in the research, for example, that more than 1 in 4 knowledge workers think there are more effective tools out there than SharePoint. And for a variety of reasons. SharePoint is not necessarily easy to use. It's not easy to manage. It has some interface issues that organizations, that individual knowledge workers may not necessarily like, that don't make them more productive, and so forth. And we also found from a secondary source, there's an AIM survey that found that most SharePoint deployments are at least somewhat stalled. Because they are fairly complex. And one of the real issues is that knowledge workers don't necessarily want to use SharePoint. We find a lot of resistance to its use, and if an organization says, okay, we've deployed SharePoint, and now you have to use SharePoint for sharing documents instead of email, we find a lot of knowledge workers continue to use email. They don't want to come down the learning curve of SharePoint because they don't see its benefits. It may be too difficult to learn in some organizations, and they are looking for better document collaboration tools, a better way to do their work. David, do you have any feedback here? What have you heard from customers about this?
Yes, I mean, what we find is that we find two things. The first is that when people look at our tools and they're trying to justify the purchase of them, the first pushback is, well, SharePoint does that, doesn't it? And of course the answer is SharePoint doesn't. While it's been heavily promoted by Microsoft as the collaboration platform, in terms of the detailed and the sort of document collaboration that our clients need to do, it doesn't meet the requirement, and it's that simple. So we actually offer our solutions as sitting on top of SharePoint, and so that it's another SharePoint feature. But I think the second thing is that you alluded to interface issues within SharePoint, and frequently the interface is not optimal for what people are trying to do. I mean, we internally, for part of what we do in the sales team, have actually turned SharePoint off now, and we use a different document management tool to allow people to send attachments to emails and things like that, because it doesn't integrate and play nicely. And ultimately what a lot of my sales team are doing is emailing people with documents we have and attachments, and to do that from SharePoint is extraordinarily difficult. So we've come up with another method to make them more effective and more productive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Next slide, please. We wanted to quantify knowledge workers' opinions of SharePoint, and so we asked a number of questions in the survey about it. And one of the things we found is that about 1 out of 7 knowledge workers agrees or strongly agrees that SharePoint really doesn't provide knowledge workers with the collaboration capabilities that they require to do their work. We also found that for about 1 out of 9 knowledge workers, they agreed or strongly agreed that SharePoint doesn't offer the version control capabilities that they need, which is really an essential component of good document collaboration. Version control is one of the real sticking points for individuals who are collaboratively working on documents. And for about 1 out of 9 SharePoint users, the version control capabilities are not really what they're looking for. We also found that the survey respondents that are in heavily regulated industries were more than twice as likely to report that SharePoint really doesn't offer sufficient document version control capabilities. So this is an issue really for all knowledge workers, but particularly those in heavily regulated industries. And part of this is probably due to the fact that those in heavily regulated industries are producing more documents, and so they're going to run into those document version control problems on a more regular basis. But again, this is not our intent here is not to slam SharePoint, but really to point out the results of the research that indicate a lot of knowledge workers just aren't as happy with SharePoint as they would be with some other document collaboration tools. Next slide, please. So we have some recommendations, and certainly these are going to vary by the industry you serve, the size of your organization, how geographically distributed your employees are, the corporate culture, and so forth. But certainly for virtually all organizations, it's essential to understand the critical role that document collaboration plays. It really shouldn't be underestimated. There may be decision makers that don't fully understand exactly how individuals, how knowledge workers are collaborating on documents, the frequency of document collaboration, and so forth. And so it's important to do maybe internal surveys to really find out the kinds of information that we found in this survey, but for your particular organization. It's important to appreciate the impact that good or maybe even poor document collaboration tools can have on all of your knowledge workers. Really talk to people, understand the problems they face and understand the minutia of the issues that they're facing so that you can get that feedback and use it to improve processes, deploy better document collaboration tools, and so forth. It's important to understand that whatever current tools you have in place, whatever processes you have in place, may not be optimized for the way that your knowledge workers want to do their job. The knowledge workers may have better ideas on document collaboration tools. They may have better ideas on process and current currently exists in your organization. And so it's essential to talk to them and really find out what, find out those disconnects between the way knowledge workers would like to do their work and the way they're forced to do it today. And then finally, evaluate your current collaboration tool set. Really understand what tools you have available, the difficulties in them, and so forth. Next slide, please. We also recommend that even if you have SharePoint deployed, if it's been widely deployed and so forth, if we can get to that next slide, please. There really are better alternatives out there, and a lot of these alternatives are typically less expensive than SharePoint. We have done a lot of SharePoint research in the past, and we have found that from an IT labor perspective, from a tools perspective, and so forth, even though SharePoint itself, the software or the service itself, is relatively inexpensive, the cost of managing that, developing applications, bringing employees up to speed in it, and so forth, is not an inexpensive undertaking. And so it's important to understand that there are better alternatives out there in many cases, and very often those alternatives will cost an organization much less. It's essential, again, through surveys or just some feedback mechanism, to pay attention to what your knowledge workers are telling you as management about the tools that they'd like to perform their work more effectively. That continual feedback loop about document collaboration processes and so forth is going to be an essential element in improving the efficiency of knowledge workers and helping to retain them for longer periods of time. And again, good collaboration tools result in better employee retention. That's not going to be true in every single situation. Obviously there are situations where you can have superb document collaboration tools and employees still leave, but it's important to understand the role the document collaboration plays in helping to retain those workers. And finally, understand that the business case, quote unquote, for improved document collaboration is much more than just the cost of acquiring the tools. It's the cost of managing the tools, making them efficient, making employees more effective at document collaboration, and so forth. Next slide, please. And so here's our contact information for both Austerman Research and Pleastech, and I think we have plenty of time for questions. Do we have any questions available?
Yes, we've got one here just come in. Where does the responsibility lie in terms of putting forward the business case for better tools?
That's a very good question. I think it's really a dual responsibility. Certainly, I think that business decision makers and IT decision makers all lumped together really have a key responsibility in understanding the role of document collaboration. And, again, depending upon the corporate culture, if knowledge workers can provide that feedback to management, to help them understand, what document collaboration tools are going to work for them, I think that's going to also be essential. So I see the responsibility really as very much a two-way street, providing that feedback both ways so that there can be that understanding about how document collaboration is an essential element of the way that knowledge workers do their job, and really to over the long term, improve the quality of that process.
Excellent. And I'm just trying to find how to access this other question I've got here. But in the meantime, I've got another one here, which was this a global survey, or were the people who answered the survey based primarily in the US?
This was primarily North American. So we had mostly US and Canadian respondents.
And one more we've got here. This is an interesting one. Yeah, SharePoint is being imposed on us right now and is meant to be replacing what we already have. Are there any studies available that look into this?
We have done some research around SharePoint. I don't know exactly what the questionnaire is asking, in terms of are they looking more at the productivity issues of SharePoint versus other tools, or the cost issues?
Yes, I mean that's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm assuming that with the word there being imposed on us right now means it's sort of they're not really that keen to get it, and wondering whether their studies which look at whether that provides a dip in productivity.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to answer that question offline if the questioner wants to contact us directly. Can certainly pull data from research that we've done recently to hopefully answer that question.
Excellent. Well, I think that's. We might have another question just flooding in here. Right. Other than PleaseTech, what other collaboration technology platforms are out there?
There really are a variety of platforms, and it depends upon the environment you're in and so forth. Zimbra has a collaboration suite. IBM through the various former Lotus Notes tools, they provide a lot of collaboration capabilities and so forth. So it's there are a number of tools out there that provide varying levels of collaboration capability. Some tend to focus more on collaboration from a communications perspective. Some tend to focus more on the document collaboration process and have communications almost as a secondary element. But there are a lot of tools out there.
Okay, and we've got one more here. Thoughts on training on the new system? I found the biggest hurdle is getting the users all actually using the system and in an effective manner. Many implementations have just sat there unused or minimally used.
Yeah, I think the real key is if you're in management, not to impose a rule, if you will, that says, okay, this is our new document collaboration tool, go and use it. I think that you really have to get buy-in from employees, get feedback from employees on, very early on in the process, when you're running pilots, when you're doing evaluation and so forth, really to understand if employees are going to like this, if they're going to be able to incorporate it as part of their work process, and really provide that continual feedback loop so that you're always asking employees, is this working for you? Provide maybe informal training sessions over lunch or whatever the case may be for your organization, but really focus on getting that employee buy-in so that they will use it. There are many examples of organizations that have deployed technology and it has gone completely unused. We've done studies around that, and we find that a lot of technology just doesn't get used because employees were never asked, and they, regardless of how many commands come down from above, they're simply not going to use it.
Yeah, and I mean, we have practical experience with this in a number of areas. I mean, we're preparing a best practices guide based on the experience of some of our bigger clients. And in fact, I was at a presentation 3 weeks ago in the US by one of our major life science clients who was talking about their approach to rolling it out. And there was training. Yes, that's a certain part. There was also, which I found very interesting, and by the way, that training included one-to-one training with certain key individuals who are struggling. I think the other thing which I found very interesting was the need to keep management informed in terms of the justification. So if we're going back to the justification, the business case, reporting, which allows you to say, yeah, we've got so many users registered, so many users are using it, and you can see the user base growing, and so on. So having that information to hand and being able to feed that back up to management and into reports, and justifying it, it doesn't quite answer the question about sitting there unused, but at least then you're highlighting the fact that no one's using it and can revisit it. Whereas if you're getting regular reports on, we've had so many registered users now and we've had so many people using it, and in our case it would be the number of reviews going through it and so on, and the number of documents, the number of participants in those documents, and the number of comments made, then you're starting to get some management material which you can use to continue to improve the process.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much so. That understanding the metrics of how the tools are used, I think, is essential, and looking at changes over time, because that can point out maybe deficiencies in training, deficiencies in helping users to understand how they can improve their work by using the new tools and so forth.
And I think the key thing in here is to understand whether the tool is right for the job, because no amount of training and no amount of pushing people to use it is going to make a tool which is not suitable for the job work. Conversely, a tool which is suitable for the job, clearly having a managed training program and an ability to explain to people how it makes their job better, and if they find it does, then you will get adoption, and then it will be a very successful project.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's it, Michael. We've run out of questions. We have no more. So I'd like to thank everybody and you for the presentation. And those who've requested slides, there will be slides available. And this has been recorded, so there will be a recording available at some point. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody, and I hope you have a good rest of your day wherever you are in the world.